clothes onto the rain-soaked driveway and locked the front door. My mother yelled through the glass, "Don't come back until you've gotten rid of your mistake." I was 15, terrified, and 3 months pregnant. For 20 years, they pretended I didn't exist. They ignored my calls, blocked my letters, and completely erased me from the family tree. But yesterday, the exact same couple who left a child to survive on the street stood at the security gate of my estate, sobbing and begging for mercy. They said they wanted to make things right and finally meet their grandson. But when my front door opened and they saw who was standing next to me, the color completely drained from their faces. They realized their 20-year-old gamble had just cost them everything. Follow my story until the end to see the shocking twist. My name is Grace. I am 35 years old, and if you saw me today, walking through the glass doors of my corporate headquarters or sitting on the patio of my estate, you would think I've known nothing but privilege. But wealth has a way of masking old scars. Exactly 20 years ago, my life was contained within a single, heavy plastic garbage bag. I can still hear the rhythmic thud of that bag hitting the rain-soaked concrete of my parents' driveway. I stood there, shivering at just 15 years old, clutching my stomach where a tiny, 3-month-old heartbeat was just beginning to form. Through the blurred glass of the front door, my mother, Eleanor, didn't look at me with tears or regret. She simply twisted her finger, the one bearing her family's antique emerald heirloom ring, and shouted, "Don't come back until you've gotten rid of your mistake." My father, Richard, stood right behind her, his arms crossed, silently confirming my exile. They weren't poor. They were upstanding, wealthy community pillars who cared more about their pristine reputation than their teenage daughter's survival. To them, my unexpected pregnancy was a stain that needed to be violently scrubbed away. They didn't care where I slept, if I ate, or how I would survive. They simply turned off the porch light, leaving me in pitch darkness. I remember staring at that emerald ring glinting through the glass right before the blinds snapped shut. Little did they know, that very ring would eventually find its way back to me. The streets are a cruel place for a 15-year-old girl, especially one whose body is changing by the day. For the first few weeks, I slept on cold park benches and inside crowded bus shelters, wrapping my arms around my stomach to shield my growing baby from the biting wind. I quickly learned that hunger isn't just an empty feeling, it's a physical ache that consumes your entire mind. Just when I thought the darkness would swallow me whole, an angel in disguise stepped into my life. Her name was Evelyn. She was a sharp, kind-hearted woman in her late 60s who owned a small, aromatic bakery on the corner of 4th Street. One rainy morning, she caught me shivering outside her window, staring longingly at the fresh loaves of bread. Instead of shooing me away, she opened the door, handed me a warm pastry, and looked straight into my exhausted eyes. Evelyn didn't judge me. She took me into her home, gave me a safe room, and eventually helped me bring my beautiful son, Leo, into this world. Under her patient guidance, I didn't just learn how to survive. I learned the intricate mechanics of running a business. Before I tell you how a broken teenager built an empire from that tiny kitchen, see how far Leo and Grace's story has traveled. Evelyn's bakery wasn't just a sanctuary, it became my business incubator. While rocking Leo to sleep with one arm, I used the other to study ledger books, supply chains, and market trends. I realized that the local community was starving for fresh, traceable, organic ingredients. Together, Evelyn and I pivoted the small bakery into a boutique organic supply service. We worked 18-hour days, pouring every single penny back into the venture. When Evelyn peacefully passed away 10 years later, she left me her home, the business, and a parting piece of advice. Never let them see you coming, Grace. I took those words, my grief, into relentless ambition. I expanded that single boutique service into a massive, multi-million-dollar organic food distribution corporate empire, operating under a masked parent company alias. I chose to stay entirely out of the public eye, managing the empire through a strict network of trusted executives. With my newfound wealth, I purchased a sprawling, high-security estate just 20 minutes outside my hometown. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, surrounded by towering gates and pristine gardens, a physical manifestation of the security I had been denied as a child. I was finally safe, wealthy, and completely independent. But as my corporate footprint grew, I quietly instructed my legal team to keep tabs on the local market back home. I knew that, eventually, economic currents would bring my past straight to my doorstep. I had spent 15 years building a fortress of success, and it was finally time to see who would try to scale the walls. My parents thought they had discarded a helpless victim, but I had quietly become the invisible hand guiding the local economy. While I was quietly constructing an empire from the ground up, my parents were busy engineering their own spectacular downfall. After throwing me out, they focused all their affection, pride, and remaining life savings onto my younger brother, Julian, the family's designated golden child. They shielded him from every mistake, bought his way into prestigious institutions, and constantly bragged to the community about his flawless future. But entitlement breeds recklessness. As Julian grew older, he became a master of corporate overreach and bad investments. He assumed his parents' wealth was a bottomless well, and when his vague consulting ventures began to hemorrhage money, he didn't confess. Instead, he spiraled into massive debt with high-interest corporate lenders. Desperate to maintain his illusion of success, Julian committed the ultimate familial betrayal. He forged Richard and Eleanor's signatures on property loans, using their beloved, pristine family home as collateral for his failing business schemes. By the time my legal team flagged the financial anomaly, Julian had completely vanished, leaving our parents holding the bag for millions in toxic debt. They were facing imminent foreclosure, public embarrassment, and complete bankruptcy. The bank was weeks away from seizing everything they owned. They were drowning, desperately looking for a lifeline, completely unaware that the giant corporate conglomerate that had just quietly bought out their debt from the bank was completely owned and operated by the very daughter they had left to freeze on a rainy driveway 20 years ago. When my parents finally tracked down the registered corporate office of the conglomerate holding their debt, they didn't find a cold board of trustees. Instead, their inquiries led them straight to the security gates of my private estate. They had no idea who owned the property. They only knew that this mysterious CEO held the power to either save them from homelessness or finalize their ruin. I watched them through the high-definition security cameras mounted at the front gate. Richard looked frail, his posture broken by the weight of Julian's betrayal, while Eleanor clutched her designer purse like a shield against reality. When the intercom buzzed and I granted them access, they walked up the winding driveway with hesitant, desperate steps. As the grand double doors of my foyer opened, Eleanor began her rehearsed plea. "Please, we are facing an absolute crisis. Our son ruined us, and we are looking for the CEO." Her voice abruptly died in her throat. Richard stumbled back a step, his mouth opening in silent shock. The synthetic sympathy they had practiced for the wealthy executive dissolved into pure, unadulterated panic as they stared at me. "Grace," Eleanor whispered, her face turning an ash-gray color. "Hello, Mother." "Hello, Father," I said, my voice carrying the exact calm, patronizing tone they had used on me 20 years ago. Eleanor instantly forced a sob, stepping forward with outstretched arms. "Oh, my beautiful girl, we've looked for you for so long. We made such a horrible mistake. We want to make things right. Please, we want to finally meet our wonderful grandson. Where is he?" I smiled, a cold, empty expression that didn't reach my eyes. "He's right upstairs. Let's bring him down." The heavy silence of the foyer was broken by the rhythmic, confident sound of footsteps descending the grand, curved staircase. Eleanor and Richard eagerly shifted their gazes upward, their eyes wide with desperate anticipation, likely expecting to see a naive, easily manipulated 20-year-old boy whom they could guilt into saving them. They thought they could use the facade of sudden grandparental love to worm their way into my fortune and erase Julian's catastrophic debt. Instead, the young man who stepped into the light didn't look vulnerable at all. Leo stood tall, clad in a perfectly tailored, sharp charcoal corporate suit. He possessed a commanding, razor-sharp presence that instantly filled the room, carrying himself with the absolute authority of someone who knew exactly where he stood in the world. He didn't look like a victim. He looked like an executioner. Mother, father, meet my son, Leo, I said smoothly, my hands folded across my chest. He also happens to be the lead corporate attorney for my distribution conglomerate. Eleanor froze, her outstretched arms dropping heavily to her sides as the reality of the situation began to set in. Leo didn't offer a smile or a handshake. Instead, he lifted a stack of thick, intimidating legal documents he had been carrying and held them out toward Richard. 6 months ago, your son Julian vanished after forging your signatures on toxic property loans, Leo explained, his deep voice clinical, cold, and entirely devoid of emotion. What you didn't realize is that our firm has spent the last year working alongside a licensed private investigation team. We didn't just buy your bank debt. We documented every single detail of Julian's financial fraud, your hidden corporate liabilities, and your impending foreclosure. These papers contain the absolute legal execution of that foreclosure. Richard's hands shook violently as he clutched the legal papers. Eleanor looked at me, tears finally real as she begged, Grace, please, we're your parents. You can't leave us with nothing. 20 years ago, you left me with exactly that. I replied, my voice steady and unyielding. You cared more about your reputation than my life. I survived because of the kindness of a stranger, not you. I will not clear Julian's debt, and I will not stop this foreclosure. You made your choice back then. Now you have to live with the consequences. I turned my back on them, and my estate security firmly escorted them out past the grand gates, leaving them in the afternoon rain, just as they had left me. Today, the money from their liquidated assets doesn't touch my personal bank accounts. Instead, I've used it to establish the Grace Foundation for Homeless Youth, ensuring no 15-year-old girl ever has to face the darkness alone. What would you have done if you were in my place? Meanwhile, click on the screens to watch 2 other shocking stories.